Good evening and welcome everyone to Wine Table and this tasting tonight. And it's a Wednesday, we usually do Thursday tastings, but this is also a very special evening. And it's going to be more of a masterclass where we're going to drink Riesling and dig deep into the soils of Rheingau, this very famous high-quality German wine region. My name is Andreas Grube and I'm so happy to actually have with me in the studio tonight Theresa Breuer. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
This is amazing. We've done a couple of, or a few producer tastings, but this is the first one we actually have one in the studio. It feels like it's, I mean, it gives hope for the future.
Yes.
And this, you're out traveling, obviously, since you're here.
It feels pretty surreal, but yes, I am here. It's
been a while.
It's been a while, and my last trip was actually to Sweden, and that was last year, August, and it's time to be back here.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you. And how's the situation in Germany? We should just go through that very quickly when it comes to Corona, but how is the situation right now?
Well, we're still in a lockdown. Restaurants are unfortunately closed. You couldn't imagine how much I enjoyed my lunch today in a restaurant. It was wow. Yeah, we're hoping, waiting. Vaccination gets on a more serious level now, I would say.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're crossing our fingers to be back when it's getting warm. So this is the hope, without any date, but when it's getting warm.
We hope for the best. It's the same here in Sweden. We just hope for the best. Before what about this spring when it comes to wine? Because I mean, quite some parts of Europe or the world has been quite severely hit by frost and stuff. How about in Rheingau, in Rüdesheim, where you are?
Well, we were really on the lucky side. Yeah. Everything is pretty slow this year, which feels strange because the last years in April we already had the feeling that summer starts, and this year everything is more actually back to normal, back to the good old days. Bud break is right now. So the first leaves are starting to spread, which also means when we had very cold temperatures last week, there were no leaves. So there was not really something that the frost could really affect. So we were super, super lucky.
Yeah.
Yes.
For once, that's a good thing. We're going to taste 5 wines today, of which one is in this sort of the ordinary assortment of Systembolaget, and we're also going to get a sort of preview of 2 of the
Gewächs.
Yes, sort of the single vineyards. Yeah, they're going to be released in early May. But first of all, before we get into the wines, could you just give us a brief background about the company? I mean, Georg Breuer, when did it all start, when it comes to the company?
Well, company is sounds so serious, but it's actually good because our company made different developments within the different years, times, generations. So it all started officially on the paper 1880, and that was the start of a wine négociant company. So it was about trading wines, buying in wines in bulk, in barrels, in tanks, in boat loads kind of, and then reselling it in another blended version. So that was the first generation where my great-grandfather started to work as the head of the company. And then my grandfather was the one who kind of transferred the trading part into a winemaking part.
And he is actually Georg Breuer.
Yes.
Is the name of the okay.
Yeah. So making wines from his own grapes was reason enough for him to put his name on the bottles. And
fair enough.
no, we're very, very happy to keep the name. And yeah, so it was in between my father, who then really focused on the idea of high quality wines, on the origin of the wines, and that as the main DNA of all our wines.
Yeah. And
I'm very honored, privileged, thankful in the biggest part to be able to continue that.
Yeah. And when did you take over sort of the business or whatever? When did you take over the responsibility for that?
It is almost 17 years ago, 2004.
2004, yeah.
Crazy. Makes me feel
time flies.
Old.
Yeah. Not at all. But also, what about the region? Because we're going to see several different expressions of Rheingau. But if you could just give us the general idea when it comes to what is so special about Rheingau when it comes to wine?
Well, Rheingau is one of the smaller regions in Germany. We are only 3,500 hectares big, which is really compared to the big players like Pfalz or Mosel or Rheinhessen, kind of like 10% of their size. So we're tiny, but we're very privileged by being placed along the river, in that part of the river which is also quite unique because we are on the right side of the Rhine River, but we're not, normally when you're on the right side of a river you're looking west. But in our case, the river takes two curves. One at Wiesbaden, which is more or less like level of Frankfurt, and then in Rüdesheim, where we are home. This is 25 kilometers away, and the river takes a curve because of a quite, for our dimensions, massive mountain in our back, the Taunus Mountains, and they kind of like make the river take these two curves, and that's why we are south facing. So we are more in the northern part of Germany when it comes to wine, but looking to the south and being next to a river, and this is just the perfect climate due to the soil conditions and the weather conditions for Riesling and Pinot Noir, and that's what we're doing.
And it's quite amazing. We talked about when we had dinner, because I visited you a few years ago. But there's an amazing feeling that you really miss now when you can't travel. Being up in the vineyards, looking out over the river, you see Rheinhessen on the other side, and you feel the sun, you feel the wind, and all that. You just understand why it's a good place for growing wine, and it just.
That's an invitation. You should all come.
I'd love to come as well. We already have a question. I should say that because the tasting today will be an hour long. We're going to continue it until 8 o'clock, and you can ask questions along the way, and we'll answer as many as we can and have time to. And Lisa asks, what's the main difference between Breuer today compared when you took over the business?
Well, the main difference is actually that we have really different weather conditions. It's not really that I had the inner wish to change many things. I was taking over the winery from my father in like a very unsuspected moment. My father passed away very early. I was like just finishing my school. I had no clue about anything, and I definitely had not that inner wish to like do a revolution in our winery. But what I've learned from my father, and of course from our team around him, that was then also around me, that it's important to be awake and listen to changes. And the time when my father passed away was more or less the same timing when all these climate changes were like realizable. It turned warmer, it turned drier. This was by accident at the same time. So we changed many things actually due to these warmer climate conditions. So we're picking a little bit earlier. We do different canopy management. We have been not removing any leaves anymore the last years to give the grapes as much shadow as possible, for example, so that they're not getting sunburned. So these are things that we're doing differently, but not because of that need for a change, really just to be smart and to do the right things. And at the end, the main goal is the same and very simple. We will try to do the best.
To the best wine possible. We're going to start tasting, and we're going to start with the Spätburgunder Rosé. And Spätburgunder, of course, is Pinot Noir in German, right? This
Correct.
is the one. And I mean, how much? Because obviously you're mostly famous for your Rieslings, but how much Spätburgunder do you produce or grow?
Well, Spätburgunder is the second most important grape in our region, and we are representing really more or less what our region is about. We have 80% Riesling in our vineyards, and then on rank number 2, it's 12% Pinot Noir, Spätburgunder, and we do red and rosé out of it. So it's about half and half. Half of the vineyards end up for our rosé, and the other half is vinified red.
How do you decide which parts to do rosé and which part to do red?
It's a mix. It depends on the clone. We have 2 different clones in our vineyards. In the bit steeper slopes, the ones that get warmer as well, we use French clones. So small grape bunches with a lot of skin. And then in the flatter parts, we use actually the local clone of Spätburgunder, which is a German adaptation. And that is used for the rosé. And we also use the bit higher up vineyards for the rosé to keep the wine
sort of
fresher
okay.
and lighter.
And also, before we taste, you actually have a Swedish winemaker.
Yeah, can't you taste that? Oh yeah, we haven't tasted it yet.
But it's interesting because also, I mean, you're very well known in Sweden with your wines. I mean, and you were before. I mean, that. But it was just an interesting. Marcus Lundén.
Yes. And I don't know what was first. It's like with the chicken and the egg. I don't know if we're known in Sweden because of him or if he got to know us because of what we do. No, but he is working actually also since 2004 with us, but he started as an intern. We had the same background with like knowing not really anything. He became the man for the dark cellar while I'm enjoying more the vineyards and people. So that's how we share.
I didn't know that until I visited you like in 2016 or 17.
Yeah, that's because he hides in the cellar.
Yeah, that's what he does. Should we taste it?
Of course.
Yeah.
And it's really nice because also in Germany we are just about to start with the vintage 20 now, and I haven't really tasted a lot of it yet because it was not so warm and sunny, and for me rosé is always you need sun outside to want it, but it's great to have it now.
I think it's the 2020 vintage on this one. It's really a nice combination between sort of the, what do you call it, like opulent red fruit, and also I get this sort of a very nice acidity, and because we tasted through the wines before, like the stony minerality. It's like wet stone thing going on.
Yeah.
What's your opinion of it?
Yeah, it is very for our style very fruit intensive.
Yeah.
Where, like, it's never that our wines are extremely loud, but this one is definitely telling something about fruit. But I'm also very happy that the acidity carries the wine and gives it a drinkiness that is very appealing.
When was the first vintage of the rosé?
Well, it's not that long ago. It was 2013,
Okay.
but it was only kind of like a test that we did. It was a tiny amount. I think it was 600 liters that we started with. We have always been doing a Blanc de Noir, a white out of the Pinot Noir for our sparkling wine, and we also bottled a still Blanc de Noir. But Marcus, my Master, came up with that idea that to be a little bit more successful commercially with the wine, we might should copy the trick that many champagne producers uses when they do their rosé, that they actually color the Pinot Noir after the whole fermentation and aging process, just before bottling.
Yes.
And that's actually what we do. So the wine is completely white during the whole process in our winery. Only when it comes to the bottling, we're just giving it a touch of actually a color dosage to pink it up. But we love the very pure taste. Yeah. So that's why we love to keep the Pinot Noir style, but color it up.
But can you do that? I mean, when it comes to regulations and stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, you can.
Because we do it with red grapes. We would not be allowed to mix red and white grapes in such a stage.
Exactly. So
that would not work. No. But we're only working with red grapes, and that's why we're able actually to vinify them in different ways and then blend them together.
Yeah, because then it's actually not putting red wine into a white wine.
No.
It's putting red.
No, we're doing it all very serious.
Yeah, of course. Richard here says, this is an amazing rosé. What's your secret?
Just told it, I think. No, but I think it's really that part in the vinification process that our idea is actually to make a white wine out of Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir has such a lovely purity and soul in it, and as soon as it gets like a longer skin contact period, it changes. Of course, it builds up and it's getting like more powerful. But if you want that pure taste, you have to keep it really blank and keep it really white. So I think that's the secret.
But I think that's fun too, because we're going to get into it when we taste the Rieslings. But for me, I mean, you saw a big part of your sort of characteristics of your profile at your Breuer is they're so clean, so pure, the wines. And I think this is too, even though it's a rosé, it keeps the same sort of, you can sense the house style.
We try.
Yeah, I think
we try.
Yeah. And when it comes to winemaking, I mean, is it totally stainless steel, or do you barrel age it or anything?
No, in that case, it's really 100% stainless steel, because we don't really want to add up the wine or the taste of the wine with any like intensity more. Oh. We just want to really focus on the purity, as you like name it, and that's the grape, the region, and that's it.
That's it.
And that's always like on our first Riesling that we taste. We also have the same look of the label, the GB on it. And when you have that GB on the label, it always tells you it's the grape, the region. And as soon as you see our house on the label, it's about like our really like serious influence as well. So this is the philosophy behind the wines.
Okay, we'll continue that very soon. But when it comes to because it's always interesting with food pairings. I mean, how you should to what you should do. I mean, you can drink this alone, but if you should eat something to this one, what do you usually have?
It's quite funny. It's actually the only wine where we pay attention to the color in the winemaking process. But I think actually also food in a similar color direction works always very well with it as well. Which can be actually beetroot, so pretty like earthy in flavor, but also some fruitier things. And in German, it's a very fancy thing to mix asparagus with strawberries.
Wow!
And do a salad out of it or so. And this is actually a super nice combo with it.
Sounds really good. And I imagine whatever you also like roasted chicken or something like that would be just perfect.
Light fresh dishes that really some animates
herbs
you.
And should we go to the next wine, which will be then
you're the chef of the house.
Then we'll go into the first white of the evening, and this is the Riesling Sauvage. This is, can you say that this is your entry-level wine?
Yeah, it's our basic,
your basic
Rheingau Riesling. Yeah.
What's the story behind this wine?
Well, it's actually a very similar story than the story behind the rosé. It's all about Riesling and Rheingau. So everything that is important is mentioned on the label. And we try also with that wine to just bring our taste or our expectations of our home and the grape into a bottle, also in a very pure way. So this is the secret or the idea behind the wine.
What does sauvage? What does it mean?
It's the wild one.
The wild.
The wild one.
Okay. No. Why that? Why that name?
Yeah. Well, my father, he was a crazy guy. No, but he was really one of the first very, very passionate fighters for the classification system that is based on the idea of the origin of the wine. So he was seeing that the time for Spätlese and Kabinett is over already 30 years ago. When it comes to dry wines, because when you do a Spätlese, because of the sugar level of the grape that categorizes the quality level. But it's one component that tells you how the wine is, but it's not really the component that can tell you or can judge about quality. So he really he was skipping all that predicate system and followed the more international, the French system, where the quality of the wines is based on its origin. So in the basic level we have the region. That is what we're tasting at the moment with the rosé and the Riesling. It's about Rheingau. And in our case it's about 3 different villages that we have our vineyards in Rheingau, and we bring them together in that wine. The next level is then a village wine, and then a blend of the Grand Crus and the Grand Cru in the top level. So 4 different quality steps. But when he did that, it was really early. It was kind of like a revolution, and the bottle I think looked quite naked because it was then just a Rheingau Riesling and not a maybe Rüdesheimer Magdalenenkreuz Kabinett Trocken anymore. So it was all shrink to 2 words. And he had the feeling that it's important to maybe use one term to just put a little bit as a character indication on the bottle. So sauvage, the French term for wild, should just describe what the Riesling is about, that it actually challenges your palate, that your tongue is getting awake, and that you just like work a little bit with the wine.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's also very interesting with sort of entry-level wines, because they need to tell something about the winery, the producer, and I mean, if we taste this wine, do you think this really tells the profile of Georg Breuer?
Well, I think so, and I hope it's also like realized by you. It's our most important wine, even though it's only our entry-level wine, but it's the one that that spreads our name into the world, and our name is on the label for a reason. And this is, well, why we also try to create the best possible basic wine year by year.
Yeah. How would you describe it? I mean,
isn't that your job?
No.
I bring it in the bottle and you take it.
I would like to hear your opinion, because can you describe? But for me, it's just, as I said before, for me, your house style is all about. It's so clean, it's so pure. It's a lot of minerality, a lot of fresh citrus, and it's it's just like laser sharp. Super, and that's the thing, well, and I think this is it basically.
We always try to be on the fresher flavor side, so it should never be like overripe something. It's always like the citric flavors, a fresh apple, all these like really fresh, juicy
the green
fruits.
Apple,
yes,
rather than the yellow.
And when you think about like biting into it, you're like. Your mouth wants more, and this is the idea of the wine. That as soon as you have a sip, you actually can't wait really to have the second sip.
Yeah.
So this is, and then if you feel that in the wine, then we did everything right.
I do. I certainly do. But I mean, where do you pick the grapes for this wine? Is it? I mean, in what part of Rheingau, or is it many different parts? And why these plots?
It's different parts, and we want to have different parts combined in that wine to really be able to tell the Rheingau taste with that wine. We can't just do it with one village. We need a diversity. And we have most of our vineyards in Rüdesheim. This is where our winery is. But we also do have some 20 kilometers east of Rüdesheim in Rauental and 16 kilometers west of Rüdesheim in Lorch. So we're spread with our vineyards in 3 different places, and we bring them together in the sauvage. Also stainless steel fermented, with the same idea, pure, not too much influence from our side in the cellar, just very, very pure with the focus on the grape. It's pure taste from Rheingau.
Yeah. And this is, we're tasting the 2019, which is on the shelves now, but we're going to change to 20 pretty soon, I think. It's on its way out. What would you say is the main differences between 19 and 20 when it comes to vintage? I mean, the challenges or the sort of the taste, the profile of the wines.
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that we're tasting 19 because even though it is just entry-level wine, it's still a serious Riesling. Yeah. And Riesling always has acidity, and that's why we love it, and we never hide acidity. So in a very, very fresh bottled wine, it might actually. It can be a bit of a challenge that you have to take in a very early stage. But even that
challenge.
But even that 19 basic Riesling is super, super fresh, and the acidity is not tired at all. No. But 19 has that acidity. That is actually what the vintage is about. It's about high acidity and high concentration. Super low yields. Which of course sounds sad and is sad, but if you have low yield and a super intense concentration as a side effect, the wines are just
the wines that are made to be sold. And
yeah, and 20 is a touch smoother. The acidity is also very brilliant and very precise, but it's a little bit lower by analysis in acidity. And the wines are maybe a little bit easier to get friends with in the first go, because 19 is pretty pushy.
Yeah.
But well, that's so great, and I'm so really thankful for that. That we year by year get to love something different in our wines, and that's why it's so hard to judge that this vintage is a good one and the other one not, because there's always
they can be good in different ways, but I mean, just interesting to follow the differences.
Absolutely.
To say that this will be more fruity and the other one will be more sort of citric. We have a question from Anders who asks, "Are you organically certified?"
No.
No.
But we're sustainable certified. So we're actually working organic, but we're not just working organic in our vineyards. We also kind of like use that concept of sustainable work in every part of our process. We're using light glass bottles. We try to, we pay serious good wages to all our employees, make sure that they have a good home when they're coming for a seasonal work to us, and all these steps. So you find on our bottles a little sign on the back label, which is saying fair and green, and this is the name of the certification. It's at the moment growing. It has a German-speaking origin, so it has been developed in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and now it's getting bigger. But part of that is working organic in the vineyards.
Yeah. And also, before we move on to the next wine, what do you eat with this one? I'll ask you that for every wine. I like to eat.
It seems like you're hungry.
This is great appetizer and all that. But if you want to pair it with food, like this upcoming summer, what do you do?
Similar to the rosé, it's about purity in food, because it's not a very opulent wine. It has a precise line. For me, this is, well, honestly speaking, the wine that you can endlessly enjoy glass by glass, actually without having food next to it. But it's also
just have like potato crisps. I mean, like something like that.
That is always, that works very well.
Or
maybe
like
with a bit of
chips,
truffle touch, mayonnaise on it, also that would work as well.
Works with everything.
But I think chips with a nice mayonnaise as a dip would be good.
Or a fish and chips.
Why is here no food?
Because we ate before. Now we're going to move on to wine number 3, and I will also changing glasses. Actually, this is going to the champagne glasses, and the wine is the Terra Montosa.
Yes.
2018, and this is an interesting wine because it's actually a blend of several different sort of single vineyards. In a way. It's a blend of our top vineyard sites, but it's a pure Riesling. It's not a blend of different grapes. I'm using the word cuvée quite often. Probably better
when I'm talking, because we have so many different vineyards. We have 30. That was 3 years ago. We have 40 hectares of vineyards, and these 40 hectares, they are spread in about 170 different plots. Wow. So it's a lot of tiny pieces, and each of those vineyard plots, they have their own DNA due to that particular place where they are, due to the soil, the microclimate, the age of the vines. So there's so much that really influences each vineyard in a very individual way, that we want to follow these characters as long as we can. So we keep every plot as it is, and then we really invest a lot of time in blending them. And we already do blends, of course, for the basic wines. So these are blends of Rüdesheim, Rheingau and Lorch, and Terra Montosa is now a blend of our Grand Cru vineyards.
Yes. Which ones?
It's in Rüdesheim, Berg Rotland, Berg Roseneck and Berg Schlossberg. So that term Berg before already tells it's
Yes,
steep.
Very steep.
Yes.
I've seen them. It's very steep.
And in Rauenthal we have the Nonnenberg. There's also a Berg in the word, so a good indication as well.
We're going to taste next. So,
yes. So these 4 sites, they're representing our Grand Cru wines, but they also represent in a very own taste the Terra Montosa as well.
But is this a common thing in the area that you actually take these sort of Grand Cru vineyards and you sort of do a cuvée of no? So
no.
When did this happen and why?
It was again my father, the crazy guy. No, it was again him. Long time ago, again, with I think a very, very modern idea. It is. If you compare it to any other classification system, it's a deuxième cru.
Yeah.
It describes the second best barrels of the best vineyards. And it allows us to do the decision for the very best barrels, because if we work in steep slopes, and all our Grand Cru sites are steep slopes, it is of course much more work. Everything is more or less hand and feet done, and it's a very well, we love the work and we love to do it, but it's intense.
Yeah.
And if we have to decide if we keep a barrel of, for example, Bergschlossberg, in the Bergschlossberg just to get our work paid, or if it's maybe not like the outstanding barrel and we would love to do a very pure Bergschlossberg and keep that barrel aside, it would be very hard for us to declassify it to a sauvage. So we need something that expresses the steep slopes, but not the particular vineyard site. Oh. So it's about slate and quartz, and I think that expresses the wine quite nicely.
Let's taste it. I mean, we opened these bottles maybe 1.5 hours ago, something like that, and it's actually already happened quite a lot. Yeah,
and I'm very happy when we just pre-tasted it. We used a bit smaller glass,
yeah, we used
and
the Riesling glasses.
Very happy that we have the tiny bit like wider ones now. That's well, I was originally hoping for champagne, but it's also okay with that one in the glass.
This is quite amazing combination of because it's a little bit more you can feel the fruit, of course. I mean, sort of the yellow fruit, but it's also very, very nice. I mean, the acidity and the sort of the razor sharp mouth feel to it. It's very and this is still young. This is 18. Yeah,
but I think exactly what you're describing also describes the terroir for sure, the intensity, due to that very, very warm sun. Yeah. The steep slopes are all south-facing, so they really gather whatever they can. And the soil, of course, brings it up as well. But also 18 was a little bit smoother in its structure. And the wines open up a little bit earlier compared to the 19 ones.
Okay, that's interesting. This one is still in the ordering assortment, I think. Yeah,
correct.
But what does Terra Montosa mean, by the way?
It's a Latin term this time. My father was multilingual. And Terra is the earth and Montosa the mountain, so it describes where it comes from. Yeah. But it's also an historical term. It's not like a name of a site, like a Grand Cru name, but it's a term that was used already about 1,000 years ago when the first plantings of vines were documented. And in those times, Latin was the language they used for these kind of documents. So the Terra Montosa of Rüdesheim was, I think it was precisely 1074, planted with vines officially.
I get it. It's interesting. This is quite an interesting question from, I think this is from Magnus. It's about the shape. The shape of the Riesling bottle is slightly thinner than other bottles. Is it with intention of emphasizing taste, or is it just a trademark? I think, I mean, he means that they are quite...
Compared to the Burgundy bottles that are a little bit...
thin. These are quite thin and
That's a slim. Very good question I have no answer to. No. Sorry.
Just leave that.
No, well, very often there's actually a practical reason behind it. Yeah. This is our experience when it, for example, comes to barrel shape. Yeah. We have egg-shaped barrels because then we can use the height of our cellars best. It's not that they have like a special dynamic touch to the wine, and I would guess that with the bottle it is quite similar, but I will bring the answer next time.
We can check it up afterwards. Yes. But also when it comes to winemaking, because the first two ones were stainless.
Yes.
Do you bring oak to this wine?
100%.
Okay.
But old.
Yeah.
Old barrels.
But both when it comes to in the winemaking, also both in the making process and the maturing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We're not really shifting wines in our cellar.
No?
Once they arrived in their home, they stay where they are. So after all the vineyard experience, we want to calm everything down in the wines. And the Terra Montosa ferments and ages in big old barrels, German oak. And as I said, they're egg shape in our region traditionally. The standard size is 1,200 liters, so it's quite big barrel. And we use them as long as we can. And we not really use them for these quality of wine in a very young stage, because we don't really want any oak influence. But after 1 or 2 years, we have the feeling that the oak is balanced out, and then we start to put the really nice stuff in it.
It's beautiful. And now we're going to move on to one of the... no, you mentioned that we're going to move on to the Nonnenberg you mentioned just earlier, which is this one, which is one of the I forgot the Spitzengewächs, as you call it. Yeah.
Perfect.
No, not perfect.
I love it.
And so this is sort of a single vineyard.
Yeah.
And tell us about the sort of the characteristics of the Nonnenberg.
Yeah,
what makes this one special?
Nonnenberg is far away from Rüdesheim, where we are based, and it is part of the Terra Montosa. So we kind of like got in touch with it, with the Terra Montosa, but now we have the pure version of it. And Nonnenberg is belonging to the village of Rauental, which is in a completely different climate zone, if you want to call it like that. In Rüdesheim, all our vineyards are straight next to the water, building up, quite steep, south-facing.
South-facing, yeah.
And in Rauental, we are in the wider part of the valley, where the landscape is more like a rolling hillside. And the Nonnenberg area is about 5 kilometers away from the river.
Okay.
And we're southeast orientated. So if you're in the middle of the vineyards, you can really hardly see the river. It gives you a completely different atmosphere there. And the soil is also a bit different. In Rüdesheim, and the Terra Montosa is dominated by that, we have mainly quartzite and slate. So very, very rich, well, powerful rocks. Quartzite is massive, is light gray, and a hard rock. And slate, the one that we have in Rüdesheim, is very dark. The one that we have in Rauental is a special variation of slate. It's called Phyllite.
Phyllite?
Yes, and it's very thin layered and very light in color. It's more shiny.
Like very...
super fragile, yes. Okay. Yeah, when you have it in your hands, you can break it, it falls apart. And there's a more sandy structure in soil as well.
Okay.
And it's a monopole site, so it's only us. So if you want to drink Nonnenberg, you have to drink our Nonnenberg. I'm sorry.
That's interesting. That's always fun. Yeah.
And very old vines.
But so what does that bring to the wine? All these things with the soil and that you're a few kilometers away from the river. How can you taste that in the wine?
Well, it's a little bit cooler there. The southeast exposure brings a very nice morning sun, but when the sun gets power in the afternoon, it is not really there anymore. So. Very interesting in the last years, the whole ripeness development is much more moderate and not dominated by extremes. And the character of the valley, like in Rüdesheim, the very narrow valley pushes clouds through. Weather never stays long. We have not a lot of rain, and it's quite windy. And in Rauental, due to the wide valley, we have always more rain. We have high humidity there. And it's not, it's not so extreme in everything. So a bit more moderate conditions. Very old vines means very deep roots.
Yes.
And that very fragile rock gives me the feeling of roots that are really digging into it and bringing up as possible as they can. So for me, Nonnenberg is really a lot about these stones and that very, very salty mineralic touch. It's
so funny that you're saying, because that's since I just tasted it, and it's, I mean, when we talk about wine, we sometimes talk about this minerality or this stony, but it actually tastes like stone and sort of metal.
And you have to chew on it.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. It's actually. It's the best way to express this wine.
Yeah, and on the other hand, the professionals always say minerals are tasteless and you can't taste them, but it reminds, and it has that...
Yeah. And maybe it is the slightly cooler side or whatever, in the southeast facing that brings this kind of flavors. But I mean, this is what you associate with minerality for me. How big is this monopole?
It's a small site. It's not even 6 hectares big, which is, well, to bring it into a relation, for example, Bergschlossberg that we're tasting afterwards, that has a general size about 32 hectares, roundabout. And we are owning or working on 3.5 hectares in these 32. So we're having a tiny share spread through that area. And in the Nonnenberg, it is only 5.8 hectares, and we're able to work it completely, which is pretty cool. It's very nice with the word monopole.
Yeah, you can see it on the label in front of it. And here we also use actually an old world Syrah glass, and because this wine is still very young, it's 19.
Yes.
And I mean, how long would you recommend you keep a wine like this?
Well, as long as you can.
As long as you want.
Some people cannot keep it that long because they want to drink it. Well, we have definitely experienced that the wine ages beautifully up to 25 years. For me personally, I really like them when they're in that period between like 8 and 12 years. Then everything is so in pure balance. And now it's lovely to drink now, but it's still, the wine is working with us. And this calms down. And when it comes to that period that the wine reaches that 10 years age, then it happens that you just empty the bottle that easily. And I think this is always the best sign for the perfect drinking stage. Yeah.
We got this question from Margareta here asking, why do you have another glass from Nonnenberg? And that is the reason. This is still a very young wine, and we just wanted to give it some air, basically. And it opens up. But I think, though, I like to drink wines pretty young. And I think this also is fun because you can definitely drink this today. It's good. It's good today. But
you can't because it's not available yet.
No, it's available. Early 6th of May will be a web launch. Not many bottles, so you have to be quick if you want to get your share. But I mean, that is also a sign of a good wine for me, that you can drink it. If you want, if you like that kind of style, and then of course you can keep it for 50 years if you want that. But I mean, you don't have to.
True. That's absolutely true. And I think with the glasses, it's also the same. A good wine you can drink, or you maybe should drink in bigger glasses, and the lighter or the easier a wine is, you should keep the glass a little bit smaller. But I am always a fan of glasses that give the wine a little bit of like a chance to develop in the glass.
Here I have a question from Annette, so I don't have to ask it myself this time. Can you recommend a dish that goes well with this wine? And also, what would be the best drinking temperature?
I like my wines not too cold.
No?
I think it's nice when they're like 11-ish.
Yeah, because we kept this, we opened these, we took them from the fridge just a couple of minutes before we started tasting, so now they've been out for 45 minutes, and so I think there will be 10, 11 around now. Yeah,
and it's a super appealing temperature. It's really, really nice.
Especially for these, I mean, these wines, I still think the first two wines could be...
chilled and fresh. And food-wise, well, I am, and this is a little bit tough in the Scandinavian countries, I'm allergic to fish and shellfish, so I will not recommend you any kind of like classics. But I love really juicy, tender, fat meat with it. Especially when they're so young and fresh and the acidity is pronounced. And I had once like a really juicy, tiny piece of pork belly with a super crisp skin on it, and then just some cabbage underneath with also a tiny bit of richness. Well, butter and cream always works with Riesling very well. So this was really like, this is something that I, with that freshness of the wine, could perfectly imagine together.
I just agree. That would be the perfect. We have one more. We have one wine left, and that would be this wine. It's the Berg Schlossberg, which we also talked about. Berg Schlossberg, also 2019. It's not released yet in Sweden, but it will be also in the web launch in 6th of May. And so, what's the difference? I mean, tell us about this site. You mentioned that it's around 30 hectares and you have 3.5 around.
Okay.
But I mean, the characteristics.
Yeah, well, now we're in Rüdesheim. Now we're in the steepest parts of the Rüdesheim vineyards. The steeper the vineyards are, the purer the soil gets, because there's hardly any topsoil left. So it is really slate and quartzite. And what is so special and also unique in our area for the site Berg Schlossberg is that it's stretched through the whole Rüdesheimer Berg, through the whole slope. So it starts on the level of the water, of the river, where we have the warmest plots.
Yes.
So there's really a lot of like sun intensity and heat. And the further up you move on the slope, the cooler the plots get, the cooler the wines stay, the tighter the acidity is. So we have the combo in the Berg Schlossberg. We are in the by far warmest part, but we have the altitude that brings something to it. And you can actually compare the color already. The Schlossberg gets more sun. You can definitely sense that Schlossberg gets more sun. And 19 was a very, very warm year. We had actually some heat peaks where temperature raised up above 40 degrees. So it was really like almost burning in that side. But the vineyards regulate themselves and they calm down, and I think that calmness is really what Schlossberg is about. Yeah,
and you also feel so if you compare to the Nonnenberg, the Schlossberg has some kind of perfume, or what you know what I mean? It's really beautiful.
Like the Nonnenberg is super rocky.
Yeah,
and the Schlossberg then brings like super fresh flowers, just like cut and
a little bit of elderflowers and a little bit of grapefruit as well. There's ripe grapefruit, but still, and again, on the mouth, this amazing acidity. It's just so pure, so clean. It's this is truly beautiful wine. And also we have the label on this one. It's quite interesting because it changes and
it changes. Yeah.
And what's the idea behind this?
Well, I guess I don't really have to mention anymore whose idea it was.
Your crazy father?
No, he was. He was living for the idea of Grand Cru wines. He was really believing in the potential of the very best vineyards if you keep them pure, if you do not blend something together, if you just focus on a site with the best possible barrels of wine of it every year. And I don't know like how deep we should dig, but in Germany, in the time when we started to use the art label, that was 1980, so 40 years ago. It was it's long. We're actually, after Mouton, we're the one with the second longest tradition in using art labels for the Grand Cru wines. So in those days, in the late 70s, it was still very, very common to use a vineyard name because that kind of created an attractivity, but the vineyard name was not just used for the best wine, it was used for as many as possible wines from an area. So in our case, with, for example, 8 different plots in the Berg Schlossberg area, we could easily, we could do a Spätlese, we could do a Cabinet, we could do a dry, a semi-dry, we could do everything. But that doesn't really tell what the vineyard is about. So when he started to only do one Berg Schlossberg, the Berg Schlossberg, nobody was really realizing that it's just one because it looked as the others. And then he said, okay, well, in his mind, he copied the whole classification idea from France. Why not copying a smart idea of Mouton with using art to create an attractivity and be able to talk about? And
storytelling is, I mean, it's a good thing.
He got a chance to tell that it's not just a Berg Schlossberg, it's the Berg Schlossberg. And we just continue that tradition. So the label of the 2019 is actually the 40th art label. And
who's the artist for this one?
In that case, it's a German guy, a young, very young, talented German guy from Hamburg, Gerrit Brinkmann. And he is, the artists are always invited to our winery. They're coming from all over. We already had 2 Swedish artists. They did fantastic works. And they always come to our winery, they experience us, the vineyards, the cellar, they taste wines, and then they're free to do what they want. We never decide for a label, we always decide for the person, and the result looks extremely different year by year, but it's a great addition.
Yeah, but this is some sort of a castle. We shouldn't maybe dwell on this too long, but you know the story?
Well, it's a collage.
Yeah.
It's a photo collage of a series of his former works that he did, where he was doing like the medieval castles, and Harry Potter was influencing as well a little bit. But one of the towers of that castle there is actually the original tower of the Schloss that is standing in the middle of the Berg Schlossberg. So there is actually a connection right into the vineyards.
I get it. But I mean, of course, every single vineyard has its own strengths, I guess, or also maybe challenges. So when it comes to working with them, what would you say about Berg Schlossberg? What is sort of the strength, but apart from, of course, the south-facing? Is it easy to work with, or is it a difficult one to work with?
It's Berg Schlossberg. No, it's like well, we never think in that categories easy or difficult. No. We take the work in the vineyard as it's needed. What definitely challenges us, or more the vineyards actually, is that in the last years it is raining too little, and the steeper the vineyard are, the more south exposed you are, the quicker dry it gets. So this is definitely something that challenges us, but that's not something that like makes our life particularly more difficult. We just have to look for the right solution for the next 50 years.
Yeah. We have here a quick one from Mats. Theresa, if passing by this summer, do you have the GGs at the winery to shop?
No. I'm sorry. They're all pre-allocated. So in Germany there is nothing of them. The only wine, if you're coming in September, we could offer you is our late release of Berg Roseneck, which then will be vintage 2015. Quite interesting as well, so plan your trip late in the year. But all the fresh releases, they are already gone. I'm sorry. Yeah.
We have also here from Maria, who asks, are you affected by, we talked a little bit about that earlier, are you affected by climate changes? If yes, how are the grapes affected?
Well, the grapes are affected in the second step. It's first the vines that just struggle to get all the nutrition that they need to build really good grapes. So we see shorter canopies, a more loose leaf wall. That's the German word, how we would call it.
Small,
so it's not like compact close, there are more gaps in between. So you could actually sense that the vines have not the full power due to a lack of water. So we're trying, well, that's what I said right at the beginning, we're trying to do less leaf work to keep the vines in their like pure growing stage and not influence them too much. We also try to cover soil so that there's not too much transpiration going like out of the soil, that water stays in the soil if there is some water. And of course, we're also thinking of irrigation and how this will, like, how this kind of the area will be kept for winemaking in future. But this is really only about the steepest corner. So when we're talking about vineyards for our Sauvage or the Village Riesling, we're actually still good, and the climate change brings a positive effect. We have fantastic vintages year by year. If you look backwards, in the 80s, for example, there were maybe 2 great vintages and 7 really horrible ones. And today it's like one year after the other is pampering us. So we are really, we feel we're definitely on the privileged side when it comes to that.
I'm interested in, I mean, if we compare these two, we have the Nonnenberg, we have the Schlossberg, which is really different in style, because you feel the sort of the cooler microclimate and some more minerality, and we have these sort of the slightly warmer and more perfume and all that. How will these two evolve with age? It's in like 10 or like say 15 years time. How will they taste both of them?
When are they released? Can we just buy bottles and meet again?
Yes,
no.
Let's do it.
No,
that's what I wanted to come to. Yeah.
Well, of course, I can't really like give you the full story for them.
No, but I mean you have the experience. Yeah.
By our experience, warm vintages, especially with a super high acidity structure as 19 has, which is really great, they develop very, very nicely. They are loud as the Schlossbeck is at the moment in the beginning, but they come to a period where they start to calm down and get really like precise. And like for me, Schlossbeck and Nonnenberg is like the same, like not ideal, but the most easygoing drinking moment is for me like this 10-year peak. But we also learned, for example, of vintage 2003, which was the first very, very hot year. And we were totally kind of overwhelmed by the development of the wines, because at the beginning we were quite afraid, and we were not really giving any expectations for them to age nice. And when we open a bottle now, they have defined themselves in a way that we were not expecting them. So even in warm vintages, the terroir is so dominant in the wine that you would even get more of the pure taste of the terroir out of it than you would in that very young stage.
That's interesting. But when it comes to the age of the vines, I mean, are they old?
Well, in Nonnenberg, yes, they are very old. They're about 60 to 70 years old. 60
to 70?
Yes. Okay. In Berg Schlossberg, they are younger, because the whole area, the whole steep slope segment of the Rüdesheimer vineyards were redone and rearranged in the late 70s. So this actually, middle 70s, so everything was planted afterwards. So there the vineyards are only about 35 to 45 years old.
Okay, only. We have a comment here, not a question, we have a comment from Ulrika who says, we have tried the first three, these ones, and are completely sold on Terra Montosa. Wow, what a pleasant wine. I can just agree. A question from me then, when it comes to hazards in vineyards, I mean, what in Rheingau, in the area, what are the main? Because now you were you didn't have any issues with frost this year, but what in a regular year, what would be the sort of the main concerns, or what you are afraid of? Is it hail, or is it drought? Is it too much rain, or what?
Well, too much rain for sure not. In the last years, too little rain.
No.
No, well, the new issue is the lack of water. This is definitely the new thing. But generally speaking, we are super privileged by being in a region that has a very, very, very long tradition, and that long tradition kind of like shows that Rheingau was always like the place to grow wines. Hail is, in some parts, in Johannesberg, in our neighbor village, it can be a little bit of a risk there. Also in Rauenthal, maybe. In Rüdesheim, hardly, because the Rhine Valley changes that structure. The clouds are moving so fast, so hail never really comes out. Frost is also something that we're not really seeing. Well, we never really get cold winters anymore. This is something that we're challenging for sure. You will not find a lot of ice wine in future, I'm quite sure. But yeah, the heat, I think we can manage by adapting with the work that we do. But water we still need. So this is something.
Need water. Yeah, that's the main. Annette asks here, how long time do you suggest to open the rosé before serving?
You can be spontaneous with that one. You can open it and just also give it a bit of time in the glass, but there's not really a need of decanting or giving it a lot of air.
No. And I think it's also nice to see how it evolves in the glass.
I love that always, that you really follow the wines.
And it happens really a lot in just a few minutes. True. Elin asks here, what are your biggest markets today?
Well, today, and not just because it's today, Sweden is actually our biggest export market. We sell most of our wines in Germany, but 2/3 of our wines are exported, and the Scandinavian countries, especially Norway and Sweden, are actually rocking the hit list. Sweden is #1, Norway #2, but we're exporting to 25 countries, many of them our European neighbors, but a little bit overseas as well. But you always find the same wine. So we don't do special wines for special countries. So there's no Sweden blend, or there's nothing particular. So it's always, whenever you have our wines, it's us.
Yeah. You know what? It's 8 o'clock. We've done an hour of tasting. It's just been so fun. I'm just going to do a quick recap, because we tasted the Rosé Rheingau, which will be out in Sweden in 11th of May, if I remember correctly. And the Sauvage, of course, which is
always there.
It's always there. And the Torre Montosa that Ulrika really loved, which is in the ordering assortment. The blend of the Grand Cru.
Yes.
And then we had the Nonnenberg and the Bergklossberg. The two different, very interesting to see, because I've tasted them before. It is always interesting to see just the to get the reminder of how different and it's just super obvious expressions of the size. Excuse me.
You should drink more.
Yeah, I should drink some wine, and then I should end it. So, thank you, Theresa, for being here tonight. This was a very. We've been so excited for this experience, to have a wine producer in the studio. And thank you for following us. Thank you for all the questions and all the comments. It's been really exciting. We're going to answer everything that we haven't had time to answer. We do that afterwards. And also, please follow Winetable. Follow us on Instagram. It's winetable.se. And tag us if you tasted some of the wines tonight, if you like one more than another, if you had a great
you can be honest.
Food pairing. Yeah, you can be. And also, if you want to know more about Georg Breuer, you can go to georgbreuer.com.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Super international.
Yes, super international. And of course, you can check in on winetable.se to read more about things going on there. We're actually, or at least I'm going to be back here tomorrow as well, because then me and Maja Bertas will do a tasting with what we call It's a Bargain. It's just best bang for the buck wines. And until then, have a great evening. Thanks for tonight. And Theresa, again, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Bye.